Hello and welcome to the Power Couple podcast. Today we are joined by a very special guest. Her name is Eileen O'Connor, and Eileen is the director of Radiation Research Trust out of the United Kingdom, where Eileen helps other individuals who are dealing with smart meters and wireless radiation concerns over health. And Eileen has been doing this for many years and is empowering other individuals take control of their health. And that's what our podcast and our message is all about. And we always say, you are more powerful than you know. And Eileen is a prime example of that in her own life, as well as helping others embody that message in their lives as well. So, Eileen, thank you so much for joining us. And please tell us a little bit about yourself and how you became involved in radiation research.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me to join you. It's a pleasure. Um, so I'll start with how I got involved, which has been over 20 years now. I was in 2001. I was busy running my own business with bringing up my young children at the time, and I was living in a beautiful hamlet in the West Midlands, and but oblivious to the fact that the cell towers, we call them foam masts, are a danger to health. And when we moved into this barn conversion, we had a foam mast that had just gone up 100 meters from the house. I was a bit concerned at the time of how ugly it looked, but I had no idea that they were dangerous for health. And we were told it was nothing to be concerned about, so we just got on with our lives, carried on with the business and bringing up my children. But over the years we started suffering with lots of health problems. I was suffering with headaches, dizzy spells, sleep problems. I'd be up in the middle of the night working because I couldn't sleep, and just total exhaustion. And my children were suffering as well. My son was having horrific nosebleeds. They were going to cauterize his nose in the end, and my daughter was having these horrific like night terrors, which were like hallucinations. So also sleep problems. And it wasn't I was really health conscious as well at the time, because I was training for the London Marathon, really, looked after our diet and health. And so it was a shock to me when I was diagnosed with breast cancer at the age of 38. And, no history of that in my family. And I'm from quite a large family as well. And so at first I thought, oh, well, this is just bad luck, need to get on with it. And so I went along with the whole sort of protocol, went to the hospital, started the chemotherapy and all the treatment. And it was then that I started bumping into neighbours. It was only a tiny hamlet with 18 houses surrounding this big cell tower, around a 500-meter range around this cell tower. And I started bumping into other young women who were being diagnosed with breast cancer, my direct neighbours. And at the end of the count, there were 6 ladies diagnosed with breast cancer. We had there was a bladder cancer, skin cancer. There was young ladies in the village who were suffering with pre-cancer cervical cells and having fertility problems.
Boy.
Lots of other people reporting all the same issues that we've been suffering with for years, which were the headaches, sleep problems, skin rashes. And we even had a horse, because there was a riding stables across the road from where I lived. And there was an Olympic standard horse that was suffering with blood problems, and the vet couldn't get control of the blood problems. And so then we knew this must be environmental.
Mhm.
And we started to call in every official that we could think of, which was environmental health officials, public health officials, our local doctors, our MP, local councillors. And we started to bring scientists in to take some radiation levels,
Mm.
because we were concerned that the phone mast, which an application from T-Mobile had just landed on the doorstep to add more antennae to the mast. So it was then that we started to think, could this be the problem? And we unearthed a horrendous can of worms. And at that time, there wasn't the amount of information that's available now on the internet. But we were lucky to have a professor who lived in Warwickshire, Professor Gerard Hyland, and he had a paper published in the Lancet, which was about the biological effects connected with this type of radiation. So we contacted Professor Hyland, and we were just on the phone, telephoning professors, and we were learning about heat shock proteins, and all sorts of entered into this world, that we were just shocked and horrified that we were being exposed and our lives put at risk. And so it was then that our grassroots campaign group started, and it was a big decision for us as neighbours. We gathered together and we had to decide whether we were going to allow the whole world to know that we had this problem in our village, because we knew, with this being one of the first cell towers in the network, one of the early cell towers, we knew that once we alerted the whole community and the whole of the UK, it ended up being alerted to the whole world in the end. But we knew as soon as we went into the national newspapers that our homes would be completely devalued, and that no one would want to live there. We decided as a community that we felt we had a duty to let people know. And so we announced it to the local papers, and it was front page news, that this cancer cluster was found. We were concerned that it was a foam mast, and that we formed an action group, and we called our action group SCRAM, which stood for Seriously Concerned Residents Against Masts. And we brought all the scientists together that we had in the UK that were concerned about this radiation, and also invited scientists who were working for the government and the telecom to come and attend a debate, a huge debate, together on one platform at a conference, and to invite all the local community to come and hear what they had to say. And that was one of the first conferences that we pulled together, is at grassroots level. That was packed. It was filmed. I've still got the film of that event from all those years ago.
What year was that?
It was in that was it through our campaign. I think it was 2003, and it's on our website.
Okay.
It's so historic. It was so important, really, to look at it and listen to what the early warnings and what the scientists were trying to say. And one of them scientists who's well known now, it was one of them was the professor I was speaking about before, Professor Gerard Hyland. And you hear, what he has to say about this radiation, and about it's not the thermal effects. It's not just the thermal effects. And you listen to Barry Trower as well, who is an ex-government military scientist. And he said at that time, this government, some of the government, the scientists and this industry will be held responsible for more deaths in peacetime than any terrorist group ever. And when he said that powerful statement, you'll see that on through his presentation. I believe every word of that he said, and I think over those years we're beginning to see that unfold now. And it's like a car crash, just watching it happen right in front of me, and just being unable to stop it, and I'm hoping through people like you who are able to reach people, via podcasts, and through other people reaching out throughout the network, that we can get to people before it's too late, and that they don't end up like we did in our village, completely unaware, and then having to go through the battle of cancer. We even had one of our neighbours who died age 51 of motor neurone disease. What a horrific way to go, and for what? For for money, for the ease of just having wireless technology. It's not worth it. It's definitely not worth it, and I can tell you that from experience. So, and I didn't know those symptoms I was suffering with at the time were are now known as electrosensitivity. And one of my neighbors was suffering so badly with electrosensitivity, but she was being misdiagnosed and told she had fibromyalgia. And she had a wheelchair delivered to her home. But as soon as we realized it was the foam mast, and we were able to take measures to try and protect our homes and to try and shield against it, eventually the mast was removed.
Hmm.
But we saw a massive recovery once we were away
Mm.
from that radiation. Once that radiation was gone, we had a baby boom in the village, and the
Wow.
horse recovered with, the problems it
Wow.
was having with its blood. Everybody was able to start to get back to living a normal life again, and sleep recovery, and the headaches gone. It was just, my son's nosebleed stopped. It was just
Mm.
amazing recovery that we saw after it was gone. But I've not stopped, from all them years ago. I carried on then, and I've taken the campaign, internationally, and I went from that early conference with just bringing all the UK scientists together, where years later I brought all the scientists together from both sides of the debate at the highest level, at the Royal Society in London in 2008. And that included, industry scientists, including Mike Repiccioli, who was
Mm.
the
Wow.
scientist who helped set up, ICNIRP. And so we held a big 2-day debate in London, and I did it on the same sort of with the same idea that I had at the beginning, which was bring them both together on the one platform, and you'll see who's telling the truth. And you can see it clearly, that where the truth lies. And the independent scientists, who I really admire, because they're putting their whole career, their lives, everything at risk. As soon as they stand up and speak out, about their science and the truth, they get their funding withdrawn.
Mm.
Many fear for their lives. And that's, but who are you going to believe? um, and one thing that I'd like to point out was, when we were pleading for our lives with T-Mobile to remove that mast from our village, they sat there round the table in meetings telling us that it was safe. The radiation was safe. There's nothing to worry about. They were working within the radiation guidelines. But at the same time, they had a report done by Ecolog, and it was funded by T-Mobile. And they didn't tell us about that report until it surfaced years later, and it was kept in the German language, and it was telling T-Mobile, it was advising them at the time when they was telling us everything was safe. This report that they paid for was telling them that this radiation can cause cancer, it can initiate it, it can accelerate it, and a whole load of other health effects, and they
Wow.
ignored that. And that to me is criminal. So
Well, like you say, it's pretty hard to change somebody's belief system when their paycheck depends on it, right?
it seems to be, sadly. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. And
Yeah.
and for anybody to say that it's placebo, that you felt better, there's no, what about the horse, right? The
The
horse didn't
horse
know.
and the wildlife, the whole, we saw a return of birds, wildlife, bees, everything,
Wow.
in the area. It was just amazing, the difference.
And so, Eileen, thank you so much for sharing that. And so, just two things to educate the listeners. ICNIRP is the um, International Commission for Non-Ionizing Radiation Protection, and they are a 13-member non-elected panel out of Brussels, and they give governments their safety guidelines, and all their safety guidelines, like Eileen was saying, the Dr. Highland was mentioning that there's more than thermal effects. What that means is that if you hold a cell phone up to your head, it takes 6 minutes for your tissue to heat up, or at least the tissue of a dummy that the military tested. That's called the thermal effect. So scientists assume that that's going to harm you, but that's the tip of the iceberg. The other part of the iceberg is the non-thermal, which are all the DNA strand breaks that occur not right away, but over time with chronic low-level exposure, which is not measured. It's only, these quick measurements are taken and that's it. So ICNIRP sets safety guidelines based on thermal, and they do not consider biological effects. So right now, the majority of the world is not protected from biological effects from cell phones. So that's one thing to consider. And the other thing that you're mentioning, um, with the with the cell tower, and that group Scram, um, you know, is that groups, are they still around, or
No, that was our first grassroots
that was your
campaign,
first?
and we had a retired physicist working with us as well, Dr. John Walker. He's since died, but
Hmm.
we worked together with John, and we went around 7 other local masts, and John Walker had some radiation detectors as well, full spectrum analyzers, and we were able to carry out health surveys, door-to-door health surveys,
Hmm.
similar to what we did in our village. And then Dr. Walker was able to plot the radiation and with graphs, and we were shocked to see that in every single one of them that had been there long term had the same impact as what we'd had as well. So other villagers were beginning to all fight back as well, and it was massive media storm in the UK at the time. We had great support then from mainstream media, and I was invited to speak on ITV, on BBC, on our main breakfast news channels,
Hmm.
and especially when the phone mast actually went down, we were on Sky News, and we ended up with a massive campaign to keep that phone mast out of our village. And
Hmm.
with people coming to visit us from all over the UK, who were then beginning to raise concerns as well. So it was in all our national papers, all of them covered it, and every week our local reporters report. It was the front page virtually every week in our, where we lived in Birmingham. The West Midlands, the area that I lived, is the second largest authority in the whole of Europe. So we were then, working closely with the planning officials and all the public health officials. They were fantastic. We had a great grassroots campaign going, but once it went on for 3 years, people do get tired, and once our issue was resolved in our village, most people just went back to their lives, and people need to earn a living as well.
Hmm.
But I was so angry about what had happened, and in so much shock that
Hmm.
I just couldn't stop. And
Hmm.
um, and then I was approached by Mike Bell, who was a lawyer who was wanting to set up the Radiation Research Trust, and he'd read about our campaign, and um, so he invited me to become a trustee. And at that time, we invited a number of MPs from each political party to join us, which they did.
Hmm.
And that's where we started then. I thought, foolishly now looking back, that if I got into the UK Parliament and started working, within the UK Parliament and the EU Commission and within the EU Parliament, that if we could get in at the top level, and I really believe that when the politicians got to understand how serious this was, that they'd do something about it. And we had loads of questions raised, lots of debates in the Parliament. I was invited onto a discussion group which was chaired by Sir William Stewart. And Sir
Hmm.
William Stewart was the chairman of our UK Health Protection Agency. He'd been the main scientific advisor to Margaret Thatcher and then Tony Blair. And
Hmm.
Sir William Stewart even raised concerns himself. They did a thorough investigation, which resulted in the Stewart report. I've got the leaflet here that was given to the government. A whole load of recommendations about, you know, proceeding with caution, especially when placing these masts near schools. Admitting that they realised there are gaps in their knowledge and that they were recommending the precautionary approach. This was our main scientific advisor in the UK, and he was even concerned about Wi-Fi in schools. and he raised that concern as well. He said children under 16 should not be using the mobile phones unless emergency use only. And all this advice was given to our government. I got to know Sir William Stewart quite well, and I respected him, and he was a decent man. But it's a shame he spoke on BBC Panorama about Wi-Fi in schools, and he raised his concerns on that. You can still catch that. I think that was
Hmm.
in 2007.
Hmm.
And he opened up the conference that I organized in London in 2008 as well. He was opened up the event in a brilliant speech.
Hmm.
And shortly after then, he retired.
Hmm.
But from there, that was one stepping stone. Then I was invited into the EU Commission to bring a similar group together of both sides of the debate. And I thought, well, this is fantastic. I'll get into
Yeah.
the EU Commission and this can affect the whole of Europe.
Hmm.
We can,
Yeah.
from the top down,
Right
as
into the
soon as they
jaws
realize
of the
they'll
monster.
do something, so we brought scientists together from both sides of the debate again. And this went on we were back and forth to Brussels in these discussion groups that went nowhere. They wouldn't listen to us. It was a waste of time now looking back at that. And I really wish I'd have kept in the grassroots level, because
Hmm.
people were waking up, and
Hmm.
beginning to realize. And that was in the early days. I was then caught up in these talking shops and, helping to get questions brought across, which in one way is still quite useful, because these questions that were raised in Parliament and the debates that were held in Parliament are still held in historic um, archives. So they're held in the parliamentary library, where you can return and look up the information that MPs were saying at the time, and the concerns that were being raised in those early days. So they're held in what's known as Hansard, and so all that political information is still available. It's on our website, lots of it. We've got a section based on just political, and even in our archive historic website, all the
Hmm.
questions and appeals that were put forward at the European Parliament. So it is it was valuable work in that sense, that it's there now, and if it was needed, because I see this going down the legal route now. That's what
Hmm.
we need. We need the lawyers to get in place. There's enough research there. There's enough harm being done. People are suffering with electrosensitivity, and I think that we've got strong chance now of winning lots of cases in the courts, and there's
Hmm.
already been some cases won in the courts in the UK over the last few years on electrosensitivity. So this is the way it's going to go.
Hmm.
If they're not going to take action to protect public health, these politicians who are paid to protect our health, well, we're going to have to do it ourselves. We're
Hmm.
going to have to take the measures into our own hands and start warning people and letting them know that, don't wait. Start to take protection measures now yourself, and
Hmm.
start to withdraw from all this wireless technology. There are safer ways of being able to use it and still be
Hmm.
connected. But it's not worth putting your life at risk and your children's lives at risk.
And yeah, and that's a great point about not waiting for government, because so many people tell me, well, Roman, aren't they doing it to themselves too? This radiation. Well, yes, they are, but think about if you're a child and your parents are not with it, or say your mother or father are drinking. Not everybody has it together. Just because somebody's in government doesn't mean that they care about their health, or just because somebody's a doctor doesn't care about, they may still eat donuts, right? That we are all human beings, and we need to take radical responsibility for ourselves, because some of us may be more greedy than others, and we just need to stand up for what we believe as individuals. And so, Eileen, I'm happy you mentioned the legal aspect, because I had a question for you, and you have an amazing amount of research, I should say, research and resources on your site, with the templates, with how people can act against smart meters, which emit pulses, like you were saying, thousands of times a day. And it's a magnetic field, which is very hard to shield. But so with the insurance companies, because I saw you had some accountability statements and things like that, where you hand it to an elected official. I guess maybe take us through the process of, when somebody downloads one of these templates, basically you're asking that government official to certify that there's liability coverage by insurance companies for these devices, right? Because the insurance companies don't even cover harm
Mm.
from wireless radiation, many of them, from what I understand.
Yeah.
So maybe take us through that process, and if also if you can tell us how other people maybe in the United States or Canada, if that's, and maybe Canada, because ministers of parliament, it's the same kind of governmental system, if they can replicate that process here as well.
Well, about a year ago, I was contacted by a family in London, and they were under threat of getting a smart meter. They were told by their energy provider that their meter had stopped working, and they needed to have a smart meter to replace it. And they were an elderly couple who had a daughter suffering with epilepsy, and they didn't want to take that risk. So they were battling against, pleading with EDF Energy, to just have it replaced with a traditional meter. They were prepared to carry on paying their supplier, but they just didn't want to take the risk. Well, the energy supplier wasn't listening, so they thought they'd go take the next step, which was to go to the ombudsman to appeal for, help. And then the ombudsman actually said to this family that they backed EDF Energy and said, well, yes, if EDF Energy can't supply you with a traditional meter, you have to accept a smart meter. And they could even get a court order to break into your home and force one in. Well, that's when this family got so desperate they contacted us. And we don't normally help on an individual level because there's that many people who contact us on a daily basis. That's why I've got these templates together, so people can take them and take action themselves. But on this occasion, I thought it was so wrong, and I was so shocked to hear that they were being threatened with, a court order to forcefully install a smart meter against the will in their own home. So I put a letter together, straight to EDF Energy, and I informed them that the couple had a right to opt out. I don't know if it's the same in Canada, but
Hmm.
in the UK, we're supposed to have a legal right to opt out. Smart meters are not a legal requirement. The government tell us that, and it's clear on the website. But then, in a way, it's a mandate through the back door, because the government tell us that, but then they're telling the industry that they must meet their targets and get as many smart meters installed as they can, and they're also fining the energy suppliers if they don't reach their targets. And then they say, well, if the energy suppliers haven't got the traditional meters, well, it's up to them what they can offer. So really, the government say it's not legal, but they've got the right to, it is a mandate really through the back door.
Wow.
But still using that information that it's not a legal requirement. And I put this letter together, and saying that, demanding that this family had the right to opt out, and reminding the industry that, there's the likes of, as you said, the insurance industry, Swiss Re, Lloyd's of London, they don't insure against this technology. In fact, Swiss Re has said 5G is off the leash when it comes to 5G, and that they see it as the highest category impact that we're likely to see
Hmm.
for health and property impacts. So
Wow.
it's quite frightening, really, to think that the insurance industry, it won't insure them. So why should we take that risk? So I in this letter, I highlighted all the research that is there to date, which is of concern. Many pointing them to directions like the Bioinitiative report with thousands of research publications, and some of the insurance industry information. I also brought in some legal cases as well in the UK that have been won. One is a child who suffers with electrosensitivity, and the parents actually took the education authority to court because she was unable to attend school because she was so ill. She was unable. She missed a year of school, and she wanted to go to school, but because of the Wi-Fi was unable to attend the school. And the case was won. And in this case, the school, she was ordered to be given a special education plan because of her disability to this radiation. So that's one case won. That's a child. And then another case was won for a lady who was in her late 50s. She was suffering with electrosensitivity and unable to work. Again, a case won and given an early retirement payment for the rest of her life because she's unable to work. So highlighting some of these legal cases as well, and saying, well, what happens if a member of this family becomes ill? Will you accept liability? Where is your liability cover? Can you provide the liability cover? As soon as you start asking those questions, there's a set of questions that I outlined, calling on the industry, EDF Energy, to provide all their liability cover information, and also demanding and saying, to the CEO of the company to take responsibility should anything happen to this family. And anyway, they won't. No one will sign that and accept their personal responsibility. And so if they can't accept it, and then where will they go if they need to make a claim? So it's up to and then I just, encourage this family to just really use that letter that I'd written and just keep throwing them questions every time they were told there was no other option, just to keep throwing that letter and those questions back at the industry, and to also get their MP involved. And I said, if you get, and they were reluctant to get their MP involved at the time, because everybody seems to think, and understandably, that it's a waste of time working with our politicians. The trust in politicians now is at an all-time low. I don't know whether it'll ever recover, but I encouraged them nevertheless to get in touch with their MP. And I knew that when their MP went to the House of Commons library, that he would find that, yes, this couple have got a right to opt out. And so, they're left with no other choice then than to support their constituent. And so their MP also provided a letter asking why they weren't able to be given a traditional meter, and that they had the right to opt out, and also bringing in the fire hazard side of this as well, because there's been a number of fire hazards, and this smart meter was going to be put in the under the stairs in a cupboard underneath the staircase, next to a gas meter.
Wow.
I mean, a child could tell you that that is probably not a good idea, and so calling in for the fire safety hazards as well. And there's other concern areas for concern. Even ICNIRP admit, that their radiation is outside the scope of anybody who's got a metal implant. Well, what about those who've got pacemakers? So you highlight all this information. So if this person has a pacemaker or goes on to needing a pacemaker, or if they have any metal implants, then are you going to protect that person or accept liability when a claim comes forward? Will you sign these letters of accountability? Anyway, so we've got all that information on our website, and also these non-consent forms. So it's a simple form that we've put together saying, I do not consent to, and there's tick boxes to either smart meter, the cell tower, the Wi-Fi, wherever you want to object against, and the reasons why you're objecting are all there on this form that you can just download from our website to say, I don't consent. So you're not consenting to this. And so from that first case over a year ago, and it was successful in the end, the industry agreed, because at first the industry were then offering to give them a traditional meter, but were wanting to charge them, I think it was about £4,000. And I was like, no way should these people pay for a traditional meter for a service that you're providing. And in the end, this family was saying, we'll just live without our electricity. We won't have any. We don't want it. We'd rather not have the risk. We won't have any energy at all. So, in the end, the industry put a traditional meter in, and it was the matter was resolved. And I found out then that there's been thousands of homes that have had meters forced into the homes, and I thought, well, we need an action pack. So I started writing letters then to the government and demanding answers, and asking the government, and under the freedom of information request, who was liable. And they've admitted they don't know. The UK government don't know who is going to be held liable for any liability impacts. So if they don't know, who's going? What about and the industry can't answer them questions. Why should we take that risk? And then I came under threat myself. I suddenly got a letter in the post from my own energy provider saying that my traditional meter had expired. Well, it hasn't. It's just a drive they've got towards everybody, using this sort of tactic. So a lot of people members of the public who are, unaware of the impacts will probably accept that their meters expired, and, accept a smart meter, not realizing what they're, letting themselves in for. Anyway, I immediately responded to my energy supplier with all the letters that I'd written, asking the CEO to sign them, take responsibility. There's no way they're going to get into my home. I
Yeah.
would have actually taken them to court. They'd have had to lock me up before I would
Yeah,
allow
they
something
sent a
like
letter
that in
to the
my
wrong
house.
person.
And I couldn't get anyone's name written, by anybody. And now they've just said, it's okay, we've taken you off the database, don't worry. But that's not good enough. They've taken me off the database. So that means my meter hadn't expired. This is just, a scare tactic they're using to people.
See, yeah,
Oh,
and thank you for sharing all that information on that family that you helped that one family, and see, like they say, the one is the all and the all is the one, and that one family resembles so many people right now. And there are things we can do. um and oh, I lost my train of thought. But yes, with what you're mentioning with the fire hazard, that's one thing that people may not be aware of with the smart meters. The other aspect is, of course, the surveillance, that it does
mm,
track your power usage, as well as being able to tap into other devices. But many people think, okay, the smart meter is there for the smart grid, so everything can be more ecologically sustainable, carbon neutral, this kind of thing, right? But it's
mm.
really about, in my interpretation, it's about data. It's about
Absolutely. Well,
tracking, right?
we've got this report here, if you can
Mm.
see that.
Okay, that's
Uh,
EM radiation. Yeah.
and
Uh,
it's smart meters, smarter practices. Well, this report, um, this was put together for the Radiation Research Trust, by Dr. Isaac Jameson. It's a fantastic report. And we actually hand delivered a copy of that report to number 10 Downing Street. This was over, I think, a decade ago. And then we took it to the European Parliament, and we've also presented it there as well. And there's solutions there. It's showing all the risks and all the reasons why smart meters is using the wireless system is a completely crazy idea. If they want to take it forward, they should use a fiber optic system, which is a better way forward for people. But to use this radiation method, where can you just imagine a street full of smart meters, or though anyone living in an apartment block, and the apartment that is above the bank of all the meters. I've had loads of people contact me since, because the smart meter campaign that started a year ago has now reached thousands of people. I did another interview, and it's reached, I think it's over 40 or 46,000 people, the interview that I did then.
Wow.
And it's, so since then I've been inundated, and we actually put this action pack together along with all the letters of response that we've had from the government. So you can download all this information and show the industry themselves and say, this is what the government is saying. They're saying they don't know who's going to be held liable. This is our actual right to opt out. Here is the research. Here are the court cases. Here is, are you going to sign a statement of accountability? And they won't. So if they're not prepared to do that, well, why should you be prepared to take the risk?
Mm-hmm.
Also, phone your own home insurance.
Mm.
Phone your own home insurance and ask your own home insurance, will you cover the risk if I have a smart meter and then it sets my house on fire? Will my house be covered? Will you cover the risk if one of my neighbours who hasn't got a smart meter becomes sick and ill because of the exposures from my meter? Will you cover my
Mm.
liability? I bet they won't.
Mm.
So why should you take that risk if you can't get cover? Industry can't get cover. Who's going to cover you for the risks?
Mm.
So there's smarter way forward. They
Mm.
should have listened to us when we presented this report all those years ago, because they're going to have to take them out. There's no doubt about it. It will become so evident. And these meters, especially, you've got a bank of them in an apartment block, or a street full of them. And you've got children as well, elderly, who are known to be more vulnerable. People who are, especially the children, who'll take a deeper penetration of this radiation, and have a longer lifetime of it. We're already seeing, impacts on children now. So, which we never saw, years ago, like I saw with my children when we were living next to that phone mast. So they'll have to undo the damage. And in the end,
Mm-hmm.
they're going to have to go and put the whole fiber optic network in anyway. So it's
Mm-hmm.
false economy what they're doing now, because what they're doing now is going to make people ill, put their lives at risk, the homes at risk, and they're going to have to take it all out. So it's going to be a massive big cost in the end anyway,
Mm-hmm.
in every way,
Mm-hmm.
on the health service, on productivity, because the workforce will be affected by it, on our children, on their futures, and then they're going to have to take the whole system out and fix it anyway in the end. So they might as well do it now, and listen to us now before it's too late. But I
Mm-hmm.
find that, the government, the only way the government listen is if there is a massive impact from the voices of people. And so we need to really start getting to the grassroots again, and letting
Mm-hmm.
people know that, start taking, stand your ground, and don't take no for an answer.
Mm-hmm.
Stand your ground and demand answers to all these questions. Use the information that's there now, because there's decades worth of research and legal information, not just on our website, and there's many other brilliant websites around, and books, and it's just
Mm-hmm.
podcasts, and there's such a wealth of information there for people to arm themselves with, and then bring the whole force of the neighborhood together, and go to your local representative and say, this isn't good enough.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm willing to pay. These are your service providers. That's their job. They're providing a service. We're
Mm-hmm.
paying them.
Mm-hmm.
So I think people need to start taking control of their own homes first. Stop these foam masts coming on the doorstep. And another good way to stop them is to stop using this dangerous technology. There are safer ways to use it, but using it wirelessly is just not the way to go.
Yeah, and I think yeah, thank you for that. It's people do really have the power, as cliche as it sounds, but we need to take action in our own lives first, and then the world changes outside of us. And but I think there's such a blind spot with these wireless devices for two reasons, among many other reasons. uh, Number one, it's very addictive. The blue light's been shown to spike dopamine and trap us in that recursive cycle of scrolling, which even executives from Las Vegas, they help people in Silicon Valley program these devices with a scroll effect similar to a slot machine. So that's one aspect that we all need to actually admit that they are addictive. And hi, my name is Roman and I'm a screenaholic, right? That kind of thing. It's fine,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
and or I used to be a screenaholic. And the second thing is these, like you're saying, is it worth the risk? I think people it may take 10 to 20 years for a brain tumor to form, right? And so it's hard for people to tie, okay, you have to really use your logical thinking cap, because so many of us are trained to run from that lion or from that tsunami wave when we were more primal, back in our day. But these low level chronic threats we're not used to as human beings. But the good news is we have our brains are expanding, are getting new information, and we need to use that brain, and we need to think forward. We need to plan ahead and say, listen, okay, oh, well, I'm surrounded by what can I do? Well, start with your own home. Like Eileen is saying, take action, because you know what? A brain tumor 50 years from now is better than one 5 years from now. And we're all going to die one day anyway. So let's just live a healthier life and enjoy our lives under our own terms rather than somebody else's. That's the point, right? That's the point of life, is exploring yourself so you can live it on your own terms. And if you don't want to, then stay out of the way. But don't be surprised when other people that care about their health want to take a stand, because it is our God-given right, our human right to that health. And that's all I got to say about that.
I think a point you made there, if people don't want to, um, well, if they don't want to for themselves, given the information, do it for the people around you.
Mm,
Because every time you use that phone and you make a call, you're forcing somebody to live next door to one of these phone masts.
mm,
So you've got to start taking responsibility. If you see someone dying of cancer, and I can tell you I have, um, maybe you'll think again. And I've seen, people who are way too young to be dying of cancer, and it is not a nice way to go. and
yeah.
and and so and motor neurone disease, there's so many other skin cancer is on a massive increase. Is it worth it for the sake of a phone call, for the sake of a like on your phone? It's not
Mm,
worth it. And look at our children. No one can't deny that they are addicted, and we
mhm,
might be one of the last generations now here to stop it, because we remember what life was like before this technology. We remember what life was like to grow up as children without this technology, and that you can survive without it and have a lots of fun, more fun than these children are having today, stuck in front of screens all day,
mhm,
in classrooms full of Wi-Fi. What are we doing to them? So no, the people of our generation today have got to stand up. I'm older than you, but
mm,
you, I'm so grateful to people like you who are getting involved with the campaign as well, who can try and alert the younger generations as well that there is a better way. There's a better way to live your life, and you can survive without this technology. And we can no one can deny the fact that our children are so addicted, and they're bringing more and more addictive technologies in. And as you said, with the smart meters, that's for the Internet of Things. Our homes are going to be bouncing with radiation. Our homes are going to be full with our fridge telling the smart meter what's going on, and your kettle when
Mhm.
it's on. Every appliance, your television, they'll know everything you're doing. And they'll be even your water system, everything. They'll be able to switch you off anytime they want and control it.
Mhm.
So it's not acceptable. And it's up to us to do something about it, because industry now are out of control, and there's
Mhm.
no regulation. They're given the free hand to do what they want, put the masts wherever they want, and there's no consideration for the people, for wildlife, for the environment, the whole earth. It's nothing. No, money rules, and
Mhm.
it's a short term um, for what? Short-term gain for long-term pain that we're going to suffer.
Mhm. Well, it's like a joke I heard the other day. The bad news about cell phones is that they'll give you a brain tumor, but the good news is when you fall down because you lose your balance from that brain tumor, you can call 911,
It's
right?
terrible. Yeah,
Because so many
yeah,
people, I hear that all the time. Well, I need it for an emergency. I need it for an emergency. Think about it.
yeah.
What our parents didn't have cell phones. What did we
No,
do in an emergency? We went to a payphone, which many of those are disappearing, or a first responder comes. If your car flips over, you're not going to be reaching for your cell phone. The first responder is
no,
going to be helping you, or you're going to be running out of your car. There's no way somebody's going to, you know, in a school shooting, if your cell phone goes off, that shooter is going to go for you, right? So let's think about this logically and accept that we're addicted, number one, and then use our common sense with what we will do in emergency. And no, none of us here is the president of the United States. If we miss a call after 8 o'clock, we can call that person back the next morning. Okay. So is it worth it? Is it worth your health? Ask yourself,
mm,
because that is the true emergency. And is it worth your children's health? And this is the emergency call we all need to make, that call for the future of our children made
yeah,
by dialing common sense into our brains. So yeah,
yeah.
no.
I recently gave a presentation as part of one of the American for Safe Technology, where they've got a new statement out for children, to protect children.
Hmm.
And I actually used a couple of examples here in the UK. A family that I got to know, whose daughter actually died of a brain tumor. She was only 8. There's a photograph of her within my presentation. Beautiful little girl. They didn't know about the technology being so dangerous. Their house was bouncing with it. People aren't getting warned, so they don't know. And then there was another lady. I included details of her daughter. She was 15. She was suffering with electrosensitivity, desperately trying to let the headmaster and the teachers know that she couldn't cope in school. She was so ill with it. They kept giving her detention because they weren't listening to her. She kept trying to take herself out of the classroom because she was so ill. In the end, no one was listening to her. A mother was battling for her, desperately trying to fight for her daughter's health, and for the school to listen. They didn't listen, and she hung herself, this girl, you know. So you look at our children now; they're suffering with depression, anxiety problems, ADHD, all sorts of conditions you never saw when when my children were young. And
And sorry, Eileen, may I ask, did she hang herself from the physical pain, or was it just like she was had like mood disorders, or what was it?
she was suffering with like the bladder problems in school, and also
uh
headaches, and
okay,
electrosensitivity, severe
gotcha.
electrosensitivity. And a mother withdrew everything from the home, so at home she was okay and was able to cope. when she was in school full of like Wi-Fi, she wasn't able to cope, and they were adding, you know, insult to injury, giving this poor girl detentions and everything because they didn't believe her, you know, and in the end, because no one was listening, I think it was a cry for help. A mother now is out campaigning, really desperately wanting to make her life not be lost in vain, and trying to alert everybody, you know, to what the dangers associated with this technology. Her name's Jenny Fry, the young girl who died. But she hung herself because she just couldn't cope with the pain anymore. And
Wow.
you know, that's just not acceptable, is it? You know, the photograph of Jenny is within my presentation as well. If you go onto our website, you'll see, you know, the it's one of the main features.
Okay.
You'll see some of the other presentations as well that is bringing in, you know, trying to look at the legal aspect of trying to bring in protection for our children, and it's really urgent that we do that. I mean,
Mhm.
we should not be able to use this technology wirelessly. Imagine, like you said, the telephone boxes are all going missing now. But if they had a Ethernet connection everywhere you went, absolutely
Mhm.
everywhere you went, because you can use a phone plugged into the Ethernet in
Mhm.
flight mode, and you can still use, you know, the
Mhm.
applications for the internet, but
Mhm.
you just can't obviously make a phone call, you know, using wireless. But the
Mhm.
other applications are there to use. So, you know,
Yeah,
if
they
they're
have
going to have the
like that.
system, yes,
Right.
you could still use it. I still use my computer, and um, I've got a fixed wired landline, you know, and I use the Ethernet on wired connections everywhere in the house to use my
Mhm.
computer anywhere I want in the house on the Ethernet cable. So it's given people the instructions as well, that simple little changes in the home can make an enormous impact. Um,
Mhm.
you don't need to use Wi-Fi, and using the Ethernet connections is faster, safer, you know, better
Mhm.
anyway.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so, you know, it does make sense, and to start listening to what the official advice is, that children under 16 should not be using these phones. Other countries now are banning the use of this technology. During the campaign over these years, I've met some of the most amazing people, and I was so honored to be invited to go to Russia, and by Professor Yuri Grigorev, who was the previous health protection um, chairman, the chairman of the Russian Radiation Protection, and he was also in charge of dealing with Chernobyl as well, the Chernobyl
Mhm.
disaster.
Mhm.
And I spent 2 weeks in Moscow, and they have so much, you know, they've tried to warn the world about how dangerous this technology is. They're more advanced than most other countries in the world in their knowledge of the research to do with this.
Mhm.
And Yuri Grigorev and Oleg Grigorev, who's now in charge of Russia's radiation protection, have been across to the UK on a number of occasions via our invitation. Both attended the 2008 conference that I pulled together in London and presented as well, and desperately trying to warn, and especially for the children, that this technology, you know, you've got to proceed with caution. Well, Yuri Grigorev died a few years ago in his 90s, but he left a book which is free to download, and that's on our website as well. It's on the front page of our website, um, and that's focusing on 5G, and it was translated into English as well, so it's
Oh
worth
wow.
getting that. And he's
Okay.
saying how the impact of 5G is going to have on our skin, on our eyes, you know, so it's serious. And Oleg Grigorev, now I'm still in touch with, recently announced that he's so pleased that they've now officially banned the use of all phones, iPads, all that technology in the schools for children across the whole of Russia. And that's been signed by the government, the president.
Wow. Wow.
And now, you know, so they're really doing everything they can to try and protect their children, you know, and meanwhile, our children are going into classrooms with up to 30 computers, all wireless in one room, and allowed to use their phones throughout, full of like radiation and causing distraction. So
Yeah.
yeah, so it's I'm so frightened of what world holds for us and the future, and I don't think this form of radiation and this technology is being given the urgency that it needs. I think it is probably the most dangerous toxin on the planet today, and that statement by Dr. Robert Becker, where he says, he gave he was twice nominated for the Nobel Prize, and he actually said that he can't think of, I haven't the exact words here, but he doesn't know of any other known element that is more toxic than this form of radiation to the planet. So and I agree with that 100%. There are other known toxins on the planet, but when I asked Yuri Grigorev, and I've just told you what his background was, and I asked him this question: what is worse, ionizing radiation or non-ionizing radiation? And we all know ionizing radiation is something to be very concerned about.
X-rays and
Yeah,
UV, too much,
yeah, so there's and he answered by saying non-ionizing radiation is worse. And considering this man was in charge of both, including space radiation, he said non-ionizing is worse because it is out of control. And he said, with ionizing radiation, we've got protection measures in place now. We know we've got to control it. He said, but this is out of control. And he said, man conquered the Black Plague, and he created a new plague, EMF pollution. And I asked him, could I use that information? Could I quote him on that? And he said yes. So I've quoted him on that ever since in many of the letters that I've written. And I asked Oleg Grigorev, what will 5G mean? The launch of 5G. They haven't got 5G in Russia because the radiation limits. They tested it in a few small little areas, but they haven't got it. I said, what will it mean? And he said, it'll be like a slow Hiroshima.
A slow what?
Hiroshima. So can you imagine that?
I can't imagine it.
On our street, on every street,
Yeah. Well,
yeah, and this is why it's urgent, and this is why people can't wait for the government to do something about it. They've got to do it themselves. Do not buy into this 5G. Don't buy any of the phones. Don't buy into any of it. If you get one of these 5G masts applications landing on your doorstep, you fight like hell to stop it from going in. Same with the smart meters. The other things you can take it measures into your own hands by hardwiring your whole system and not using Wi-Fi. Same with your phones. Get a hardwired phone, or if you do have to use a mobile, it's like essential, urgent, emergency use only. And like you said, if an employer is saying you've got to use it for your job, well, are they going to accept liability if you become ill? Are they going to, compensate you for if you become ill? No one can compensate you if you're dead. What's going to happen then? So is it worth it? Or should our employers now start protecting their employees as well and do the same? Hardwire their offices, make sure their employees, have got a hardwired phone as well, or using it on the Ethernet cables in a safer way. So I think employers need to start also protecting the workforce, but the way to start is in your own home, and then the ripple effect into the schools, into the workforce, into and eventually when the public then en masse start demanding that our politicians do something about it, and we're just simply not buying into it, well, what can they do if we don't buy into it?
exactly.
It's the public that's doing it to ourselves.
They change their jobs.
Yeah, we're doing it to ourselves. We're the ones buying into it. We're the ones exposing all your friends and your neighbors and your family, your own family, So to this
Mm,
radiation when there's no need.
mhm. Yeah, as soon as you
So,
make that cell phone call, that radiation has nowhere to go. It never demodulates, so it never leaves the earth, to my
mhm,
understanding. So these are just
mhm.
things we need to understand because
Who thought it was a good idea to put a microwave transmitter right next to your brain,
yeah, the
right
person
next to your
monitoring you.
body? Yeah, yeah, they know everywhere you go.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Well, Eileen, thank you so much. We I do have to uh call it here, but if you can let us know again where people can find you and if there's anything else you'd like the audience to know, um please go ahead.
yeah, you can find us on the radiationresearch.org. You'll find our website there. It's got lots of all the templates to download. We've got an infographic on there. We've called it Smarty Meter. It's a big cartoon, and it's like a cartoon monster. And in the middle of the meter, it's got 1984 as the reading of the meter number. But within that cartoon, there's lots of little boxes, which if you click on them, takes you right to all the information I've been talking about, the letters that you can download, the research, the liability details, the non-consent forms. So it's all there ready to use, the action pack ready to go.
Mm,
So and then the details about the children's um, conference that I presented at, and details of those two children that I highlighted, that's there on the front page as well. And we've got lots of information on research, political information, latest news. So you'll see what's going on around the UK, and lots of information about what's going on around the world as well. So yeah, tap into that and just use it and stand your ground. Don't take no for an answer, and start taking control yourself. You know, the there's another campaign on our website called Save the Males. Some great
mm,
posters on there. And it was a campaign we had in the UK. You can actually download those posters, and it's a
mm,
picture of you'll see of a man's trouser pockets with the phone sticking out the side of the pocket. And we
mm,
had all these posters put in the men's toilets throughout
mm,
the UK, and on the motorway,
mm,
in the motorway cafes, when you stop at motorway stop, and in
mm,
all their male toilets. And it was quite a successful campaign at the time.
mm,
So when the men went to the toilet, they saw this poster, and it said "Save the males." And they saw this image, and then it said, "The future is in your hands."
mm.
And then details all about the radiation
That's
damage it
good.
can do and
I
against
like
your
that.
fertility. And but those posters are there for you to download. We got a complaint in the end from industry, but we'd reached the end of our campaign by
Yeah.
then anyway.
That's how you know it's
And
successful.
it was successful. People all over the UK were talking about it,
Yeah.
and so those posters are there so you can download and use them.
Okay.
Take them into motorway and put
Mm,
them, in the toilets. And so there's things we can do to try and create awareness, and that's what we need to do. We need to be telling everybody and anybody and warning everybody, to look into this and take it seriously.
mhm.
um, yeah, for the sake of our kids especially.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like they say, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So this is, we need more prevention now than ever. And
Mm,
yeah, thank you again so much for what you've done, what you're doing, what we will all do together. And we are all humans on this planet. So Russia is a great example because those scientists, they're just human beings. And in a
yeah,
world today where we are so polarized, this is an issue we can all unite over. And
definitely.
so let us take that into consideration as well. And please, the listeners, I will leave links to all this. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me, of course. And yeah, you can leave comments as well. And thank you so much again. And remember, we are more powerful than we know.
Definitely. And thank you.
Thank you, Eileen.